Welcome to my channel. They said she didn't belong in the cockpit. Too weak, too slow, just a publicity stunt. But when 60 enemy tanks rolled in and every seasoned pilot was about to be crushed, Captain Dana Rains defied orders, fired up her Wyvern, and rewrote the rules of air combat forever. They told me I didn't belong in a combat cockpit. Too much power, too much strain, Colonel Benton scoffed as I ran my pre-flight checks. The AH-99 Wyvern isn't a sightseeing chopper. It demands reflexes like lightning and muscle to match. He wasn't talking to me directly, but he didn't need to. The circle of male pilots around him laughed like it was a stand-up routine. I just kept working through my checklist on the tarmac at Fort Sable, methodically inspecting every missile rack, fuel valve, and pressure gauge. I've learned not to flinch. Colonel Benton went on. This isn't a training sim, gentlemen. This bird pulls 4 GS in a turn. You black out, you die. You miss a target, men die. It's not made for every body type, certainly not every gender. More laughter. I didn't look up. At 29, I was the first female combat pilot ever assigned to the 172nd Night Talon Regiment. The Wyvern was the latest generation attack helicopter, deadlier, faster, and meaner than anything we'd fielded before. My call sign? Ember. Real name? Captain Dana Rains. And if everything went the way the briefing suggested, I'd soon be the only thing standing between a slaughter and salvation. I heard them whisper about me every day. She's just a publicity stunt. Can she even bench her own flight gear? The weight of doubt was constant, but I wore it like armor. Then came the sirens. At 0531, the base alarm screamed, a banshee wail that ripped across the flight line. We all froze, until Major Tamara Lynn burst through the hangar doors, her face pale as paper. This is not a drill, she shouted. Enemy armored column moving fast on forward position Sierra. 60-plus vehicles. ETA 90 minutes. Scramble everything that flies. The air went cold. Benton's swagger vanished. Major Lynn flicked on the tactical holomap, the red blotches crawling across the desert between the mountains. Tanks, APCs, mobile SAM launchers, all zeroed in on a base manned by 200 U.S. soldiers, light on anti-armor, and totally cut off. She turned to us. This is a coordinated strike. They know our air response time. They're expecting us. Benton grunted. 7 Wyverns are combat ready. Ward, you take Talon flight, east flank. Marquez, Bravo flight, center column. Ruiz, Hammer flight, support strike. Engage, neutralize, and break their push before they breach FP Sierra. Someone finally asked, what about Rains? He didn't even look at me. She stays grounded. This op's for seasoned pilots only. I was already in my seat. My hands were steady, powering up the Wyvern with practiced ease. Systems online. Weapons green. I spoke into the comms without hesitation. Captain Rains, Wyvern 4-1. Combat ready. Standing by. Negative, Benton barked. You are not cleared for combat. Stand down. That's a direct order. But I didn't stop. The engines roared to life as my bird lifted from the pad. I punched coordinates for the western edge of the enemy advance, exactly where the radar coverage was weakest. Sir, I replied evenly. With respect, I won't sit back while American soldiers get overrun. We don't have enough birds to hold that line without me. I'm going. Rains, return to base now. Negative. And I was gone. 6 Wyverns streaked across the sky ahead of me. I trailed in their rotor wash for only a moment before veering southwest, skimming the canyon floor, radar profile minimal. I knew what they were flying into. I'd seen it in the mission data no one else read closely enough. I'd run the simulations nobody wanted to try. The ones where you only made it out if you understood how armor thought, how air defenses anticipated, where their vision failed. I had planned for this moment in silence, alone. Now, I was going to prove every word they'd ever said about me wrong, with fire. The sun hadn't cleared the canyon edge when I broke low over the Wadi Tala's ridgeline, rotor blades screaming inches above the sand. My Wyvern's shadow ghosted over the rocks as I stayed beneath the radar envelope. Every inch of terrain I hugged made me harder to track. Every second ticked closer to FP Sierra's fall. Ahead of me, the battle had already begun. Talon lead taking fire. SAMs are active. Repeat, air defenses are online. That was Captain Ward's voice, sharp with pressure. In the distance, two bright flashes snapped against the dawn sky. Wyverns flared countermeasures, dancing under a missile curtain far denser than predicted. Bravo 2 hit, hydraulics failing. Jamming. Hammer flight can't get a lock. It was unraveling fast. They'd walked right into a trap, textbook anti-air layering. Mobile SAM launchers covered by armored IFVs. Radar overlap, zones rotating in sync. It was a kill net, and it was working, but I wasn't flying straight into it. I dropped to 30 feet, riding the sand like a wave. My targeting system mapped the heat signatures. There, the first SAM platform, tucked into a dry riverbed, camouflaged under netting. My thumb flicked the Hellfire selector. Missile 1 away. The explosion snapped up like a thunderclap, fire devouring the battery in seconds. I curved west, sighted the command vehicle near a relay antenna. Missile 2 locked. Fired. Command down. The enemy formation stuttered, but I didn't give them time to recover. I turned into a shadow. Every shot I took came from an angle no one expected. My bird vanished into ravines, crested ridgelines only to dive again like a hawk. They couldn't pin me, couldn't even track me. I'd built my approach routes using thermal blind spots and radar slop. They never saw it coming. Missiles 3 and 4 hit their remaining radar assets. SAM coverage crumbled. Talon lead, multiple hits confirmed. But who the hell's cleaning our airspace? I didn't answer. I wasn't here for credit. I was here to win. With their air defenses in ruins, the rest of our flights finally got room to breathe. But we were still outnumbered, badly. 60 vehicles, tanks, APCs, fuel trucks, ammo haulers. Every one of them pointed at FP Sierra. My targeting display lit up like a war god's shopping list. Missile 5 ignited a fuel convoy. The fireball rolled into 3 tanks. Missile 6 detonated their forward repair rig. Missiles 7 and 8, ammo trailers. Secondary blasts tore through 2 BMPs and a command IFV. In less than 3 minutes, I had killed 13 targets. And I was just getting started. Switching to my 30mm cannon, I rolled sideways and descended, strafing a line of APCs with armor-piercing rounds. Every pull of the trigger landed a burst exactly where it counted. Crew hatches, track sprockets, weapon mounts. I didn't just kill vehicles, I disabled momentum. Talon lead came over the net, breathing hard. "Rains that you?" I didn't reply. I pivoted and vanished behind a bluff, circling for the next pass. I was flying the Wyvern like it was a scalpel, and the battlefield was a body full of tumors. One by one, I cut them out. I banked hard left, my Wyvern's rotor blades screaming through the rising heat. The desert below flashed with chaos. Fires raged where fuel trucks had cooked off, smoking hulks of armor littered the landscape. And yet, they kept coming. What was left of the enemy column had broken formation and spread wide, trying to outflank our remaining birds. Bravo flight regrouping, but we've lost visual on Ember, someone said over comms. I wasn't surprised. That was the idea. I pivoted behind a rocky outcrop, dropped altitude to 10 feet, and let the terrain mask me again. On my HUD, I counted 31 hostiles remaining. Half their force gone, but the other half had figured out they were being hunted, and they were scared. Enemy comms chatter, picked up through my passive eavesdropping array, spiked with stress. Single Apache, one voice barked. Negative, unknown platform. It's mobile. Fast. Hitting us from shadows. They still didn't know what I was flying. The Wyvern had been deployed quietly. Only 8 units ever built. Faster than the Apache, stealthier, and wired into the most advanced targeting system on the planet. And I had logged more simulator hours on this model than anyone alive. Because no one expected me to fly it. I was just the experiment. A PR checkmark in a unit full of men with jawlines carved from arrogance. They'd all assumed I was assigned the Wyvern as a training stunt. Now they were watching me dismantle an entire armored column. Missiles 9 through 12 obliterated a cluster of BMPs hiding in the shadows of a rocky ridge. 2 attempted to flee, one didn't make it. The other reversed so fast it slammed into a tank. I watched the tank commander bail and run. And I kept going. Missiles 13 and 14 wiped out the last 2 active SAM units. The air was ours now. Talon lead, Ember here. Airspace clear. Your go for full strike pattern. There was a pause on the channel. Copy that, Ember. Engaging. Their voices had changed. No longer skeptical. Now they sounded like they were following a ghost. I looped back north, my remaining Hellfires armed. I sighted the last command node, a reinforced IFV acting as mobile HQ. Missile 15 locked. Missile fired. The vehicle went up in a clean, perfect arc of destruction. Flames licked the sky. Enemy coordination dissolved instantly. Some tanks stopped altogether. Others tried to turn back. Too late. The canyon entrance they came through now held wreckage and smoldering husks. No retreat. So they turned toward us, desperate. That's when I dove. My cannon tore across the line. BMPs burst like tin cans. Tank optics shattered. I raked tracks, blew hatches, carved holes through armor. Every round counted. Every shot was deliberate. I wasn't firing wildly. I was choosing, not just which vehicles to destroy, but when. Their morale had already broken. I was just dismantling their resolve. One of the last tanks began reversing wildly, drifting sideways through burning debris. It slammed into the remains of a supply truck and stopped dead. I hovered overhead, cannon aimed, ready to fire. But the crew popped the hatch, threw their helmets down, and raised their hands. They'd had enough. The field was still burning when I brought my Wyvern to a hover. My fuel was low, ammo nearly spent. The cannon's barrels glowed faintly from the heat of continuous fire. And yet, the battlefield was silent. No more missiles, no more machine gun fire, just crackling flames and the low hum of my rotors. Confirm status, Ember. Major Lin's voice came through, this time calm. Not cold. What's your count? I exhaled slowly. 43 confirmed kills. The rest turned back. No remaining armor advancing on FP Sierra. A beat of silence. Then, you did that solo. Another voice, Talon lead, jumped in. She didn't just take pressure off. She dismantled their strategy. Air defenses, command, support vehicles. She broke their spine. I didn't respond. Because it wasn't over. I circled wide, making one final sweep for stragglers. The desert was a graveyard now. Wrecked tanks spilled smoke into the rising morning heat. BMPs lay half-submerged in sand. Their crews either captured or vaporized. A few enemy soldiers had scattered on foot, but none posed a threat. FP Sierra was safe. Not one American casualty. I turned toward Fort Sable. The return flight was quiet. No chatter, no victory calls. My systems were running on fumes. The Wyvern rattled slightly as I crossed the final ridge. She'd taken hits, a cracked panel, minor scoring along the engine cowling, but she'd held. I brought her down clean on pad 6. Engines spinning down. Systems offline. I didn't take off my helmet right away. I sat there, listening to the rotor blades wind down like the fading heartbeat of a dragon. Then I saw them. The entire base had lined the runway. Mechanics, comms techs, ground crew, even supply officers who never left the building. They stood still, eyes wide, watching my bird settle like something out of a myth. I climbed down slowly, feet hitting the tarmac with a metallic thud. The heat soaked through my boots. Colonel Benton stood near the hangar doors, arms crossed. His face was unreadable. As I approached, he finally spoke. "Captain Rains," he said, voice low. "I gave you a direct order to stand down." I nodded. "Yes, sir." "You disobeyed. Left the base without clearance." "Yes, sir." He took one step closer, looking me in the eye. "And you eliminated 43 enemy assets. Saved 200 American lives. And kept every pilot under my command alive." A pause. "Explain how." I pulled off my helmet. My braid was soaked in sweat. My skin felt baked from the heat. But my voice was steady. "Sir, I studied enemy armor doctrine for 6 months after being assigned to the Wyvern," I said. "I ran sim ops based on satellite logs, patrol data, and every previous armor engagement we logged from that region. And I found patterns. SAM positions cycle in 5-minute overlaps. BMPs protect T-90 tanks in convoy, but they leave gaps during realignment. I built flight paths through those holes, mapped out weak points. I practiced it all in a simulation the rest of you never bothered with." Another pause. Then Captain Ward stepped forward. His left arm was wrapped. He'd taken shrapnel. He looked at me like he was seeing something new, or maybe something he should have seen a long time ago. "You came in from angles we didn't expect. The enemy didn't either," he said. "They trained to fight textbook tactics. You rewrote the book." "No," I said. "I just actually read the terrain." The debrief room was packed. Not with generals or top brass, but pilots, analysts, and crew chiefs. Everyone who'd ever questioned whether I belonged in a cockpit showed up. Not out of obligation, out of curiosity, because something impossible had just happened and they needed to understand how. On the screen, Major Lin pulled up the sat feed. "Here's the armored column at T-80, she said, gesturing to the tight formation crawling toward FP Sierra. Layered defense. Overlapping mobile SAMs. Doctrinally sound. Should have been impenetrable to air assault." She tapped forward. "Then Captain Rains hits this spot, southern flank, blind to radar due to dune topography and a dead satellite patch." No one had considered it a viable entry. They all turned to look at me. I didn't speak. I just listened. "This path," she continued, "wasn't part of any flight training package. It wasn't in our sims. Yet she followed it with perfect terrain masking, flying at 30 feet, avoiding detection, engaging with minimal exposure." Colonel Benton stood at the back, arms folded, silent. But he was watching closely. The footage shifted to thermal overlays, flashes of red blinking out as I picked off the SAMs and command vehicles. Then the ammo. Then the fuel. Then everything else. "Her first 6 missiles weren't aimed at tanks," Lin said. "They targeted support. She dismantled the logistics before hitting armor. She didn't just engage targets. She removed the enemy's ability to coordinate, resupply, and fight back." Captain Ward, sitting beside me, leaned in. "You knew where their thinking would go before they made their next move." I nodded. "Tanks rely on timing. You disrupt that, and they lose their edge." Someone else asked, "How did you stay off their radar that long?" "I followed wind patterns," I said. "Dropped under thermal layers during reheat. Used terrain to shield my exhaust. This bird," I tapped the table, "can fly like a phantom if you treat her like one." The Wyvern wasn't just a helicopter to me. It was a partner, a blade. And I had sharpened it for months while everyone else practiced the same tired dogfight drills. Lin closed the footage and faced the room. "Captain Rains destroyed 43 enemy vehicles in one sortie. That's not just a mission success. That's history." You could hear it in the air, something shifting. The mood, the perception, the doubt, all cracking like glass under weight. Then Colonel Benton finally spoke. "I grounded you." "Yes, sir," I replied. "Because I believe this aircraft demanded too much." He walked forward slowly. I was wrong. He stopped in front of me, looked me square in the eye. "You didn't just prove you could fly it. You proved you could master it. Effective immediately, your lead pilot for Wyvern tactics." I was stunned, not because I doubted I could do the job, but because I never thought they'd admit I could. He extended a hand, and I shook it. 3 weeks later, everything had changed. They gave me the title, Lead Tactical Pilot, Wyvern Division. But more than that, they gave me the room to speak, to teach, to shape how we trained. And every briefing started with the same phrase: "Forget what you think you know about combat aviation." I walked into Hangar 7 one morning to find 4 pilots, 2 from my own squadron, 2 from an allied unit, poring over the flight data from FP Sierra. They stood when I entered. That had never happened before. "Captain," one said, "we've been studying your low-angle terrain masking loop, the one you used to blindside the SAMnet. How did you calculate the crosswind shifts in the valley?" I showed them, not because I wanted praise, but because I wanted them to live. That became my mission: give them the tools. Show them how to see the battlefield like I did. Not just as targets and threats, but as movement, rhythm, instinct. I started developing simulations based on real-world engagements, layering in the variables that textbook drills always ignored: thermal distortion, enemy repositioning logic, battlefield psychology. We called it the Ember Method, and it caught fire. Within 2 months, every Wyvern squadron in the Western Command Theater was running my flight modules. Within 6, NATO allies had translated the sims and incorporated them into their own doctrine. They asked for my field notes. They built new training routes based on the corridors I flew. Pilots from France, Canada, Poland, and Australia sent requests to Fort Sable for briefings on the Rains maneuver, a steep drop, off-angle strike sequence I'd used to blindside a retreating tank column. They gave it a name. I hadn't. I was too busy working on the next sim. Because FP Sierra wasn't luck. It wasn't improvisation. It was math, instinct, memory, and preparation. I wanted every pilot who followed me into the sky to have the same edge I'd carved from silence and doubt. But not everyone supported the change. You can't rewire decades of doctrine over one mission, a general once said to me during a high-level panel. I looked him in the eye and replied, it wasn't one mission. It was 200 lives. He didn't speak again after that. My flight hours tripled. Every sortie was a proof of concept. Every engagement, whether real or simulated, reinforced the same truth. Brute force didn't win air wars anymore. Precision did. And precision didn't care who was flying the stick. One night, Captain Ward caught me alone in the Sim Bay after midnight. I was rerunning the FP Sierra engagement again. You've flown that sim 87 times, he said. 91. I corrected, not looking up. Why? I paused. Because it should have gone differently. If I'd been slower, if I hadn't seen that blind spot. You saved everyone. But I didn't plan for everything. I want to make sure next time, I will. He was quiet for a while. Then, that's why they follow you now. By the end of that year, I had a new call sign. Not Ember. Not even Captain Rains. They called me the Phantom Viper, a nickname started by a French exchange pilot who watched me disappear into a dust storm during a live-fire exercise, reappear 5 seconds later behind the target zone, and hit 4 mobile platforms in 2 bursts. The name stuck, and with it came something else I never expected, momentum. I was promoted to Chief Warrant Officer 5, the youngest in the division's history, and the first woman to hold a lead doctrinal position for a frontline assault unit. I didn't even have time to think about the milestone. I was already being asked to brief the Joint Aviation Command on integrating my tactical models into Army-wide Apache and Wyvern training. You're not just changing how we fly, Major Lin told me one afternoon. You're changing why we fly the way we do. That hit harder than I expected, because that's what I'd always wanted, to matter beyond the sorties. To give others a better chance to survive. That was the point of all this. My new role wasn't just flight, it was doctrine. We built out Project Ghostline, a joint tactical program that trained pilots on terrain masking, high-speed flank strikes, and low-visibility pursuit. We rewrote the simulator architecture, created new certification standards, and developed software that used machine learning to adapt enemy behavior mid-simulation. It was war-fighting evolution, and I was at the center of it. But with change came friction. Some old-school commanders still pushed back, still mumbled about tradition and brute strength and doing it the old way. Until the next combat op came. That op was in northern Keshen, where a mechanized insurgent force had dug into a fortified mountain corridor. American troops were pinned, and conventional close-air support had failed twice. We were called in. 3 Wyverns. Me in the lead. We went in at dusk, through side channels the enemy didn't even know were visible from air. The new AI-driven target analysis system I helped develop tagged their supply lines first. We hit them before they knew we were there. 0 friendly losses. 47 enemy assets destroyed. Mission clock, 18 minutes. When we landed, a senior general from Strategic Command stood on the flight line, waiting. You flew the new doctrine? I nodded. Every line of it. He looked down at the pad in his hand, where our combat telemetry scrolled in real time. Then he said, all right, let's talk about scaling. And just like that, the last wall cracked. 6 months after Keshen, I was summoned to Joint Base Kingsworth. They didn't tell me why. I walked into a briefing room with no windows, 2 generals, 1 Pentagon liaison, and a single line on the agenda screen. Unit proposal, all-female combat squadron, codename, Desert Vipers. I froze. Then I laughed. Thought it was a test. A joke. Until one of the generals spoke. We need a unit that can operate outside the doctrinal blind spots. Fast, surgical, unpredictable. You've already proven it works. Now we want you to lead it. I had to sit down. For years, I had been the only one. The experiment. The outlier. The one they watched. Now they wanted me to build a team. To make what I'd done repeatable. Build your team. Design your training. Your call on the birds. You'll answer directly to Theater Command. I asked the only question that mattered. How many missions do we take? As many as you can handle. So I got to work. The first woman I selected was First Lieutenant Sarah Blade Harper, flawless gunner, cool under pressure, better on the chain gun than anyone I'd ever flown with. Then Specialist Amanda Sparks Lee, who could read a Wyvern's diagnostics by ear and tune it mid-flight, if needed. By the time we activated the squadron, I had 8 pilots, for birds, and a base crew of 37. Every one of them had been told they didn't belong at some point. Every one of them had something to prove. They weren't just good. They were exceptional. We trained like demons. Night runs, dust storms, sim after sim after sim. We practiced blind drops, evasive loops, multi-angle approach chains. We made the impossible feel routine. And we hit the field. In the next 12 months, the Desert Vipers flew 19 combat missions across 4 regions. Our kill ratio surpassed every other Wyvern unit by over 40%. Not a single pilot was lost. Not one bird shot down. They stopped calling us an experiment after Mission 5. By Mission 10, we were the most requested support wing in the theater. We became something more than a unit. We became a statement. That air combat wasn't just about brute strength. It was about precision, clarity, will, and that the sky belonged to those who knew how to read it, not those who merely muscled through it. We didn't fly for glory. We flew because no one else could do what we did. Because somewhere down there were soldiers who needed a shadow to arrive when everything else had failed. We were that shadow. They flew me to D.C. under orders. I didn't know why, not exactly. I'd been told to bring my dress uniform. No flight gear. No sim briefings. Just stand by. When I arrived, they took me straight to the Pentagon, through 2 security checkpoints, and into a chamber I'd never thought I'd stand in. That's where I was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross with Valor, the youngest female combat pilot to ever receive it, and the first ever awarded for a mission where the pilot disobeyed orders to save lives. But the medal wasn't what got me. It was what came after. General Halvorsen, the same man who once questioned if I had the physical resilience for combat aviation, walked me to a secure room. Inside was a tactical map dotted with small red markers across the globe. Each pin represented a confirmed kill from FP Sierra. All 60 of them. Your kill record still stands, he said. Unmatched. Untouched. That mission changed everything. At the bottom of the map, in his handwriting, were 5 words. She flies like she was born to. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. Because behind me stood the future. 4 pilots from the Desert Vipers, waiting for the next assignment. Not one of them looked nervous. Not one of them questioned their right to be there. The ripple effect had begun. Across NATO, pilot selection programs shifted. Women were no longer shunted toward transport roles or logistical units. They started appearing in attack squadrons, forward recon flights, and test pilot programs. They earned their wings, and no one dared question if they could carry their weight. They'd see me do it. But I reminded them, always, it wasn't about me. It was about what came next. The real change wasn't just that women were flying Wyverns. It was that the entire combat doctrine began adapting to how we fought. Sim programs around the world integrated terrain masking and low-vis approach patterns based on my method. The Rains loop became part of the required qualification course for new gunship pilots. Even allied nations, Germany, Japan, Australia, began requesting cooperation on what they now called the Ember Doctrine. I didn't push for any of that. I just flew my bird the way I'd always believed it could be flown. And the world followed. Still, I never forgot what that first day felt like. Being grounded, doubted, laughed at. I carried that memory with me into every hangar, every ops tent, every sim room. And when new pilots, especially young women, showed up asking if they really had a shot, I gave them the same answer. You don't prove yourself with words. You do it when the sky goes dark and the world turns quiet. And you're the only thing standing between hell and the people who can't run from it. Years passed. The world changed, and so did the wars. But in every conflict where a Wyvern flew low over hostile ground, I saw the legacy of what we started. Our sims trained thousands. Our manuals were translated into 22 languages. And somewhere out there, young pilots who had never even heard of Fort Sable were flying maneuvers named after the Vipers. After 18 warzone deployments and nearly 3,000 combat flight hours, I stepped back. Not because I was tired, but because it was time to let others lead the charge. I took a position at the Joint Aviation Warfare School, where we built the next generation of air cavalry tactics. My lectures didn't start with maps. They started with questions. What do you see? Where would you hide? What would you do if every doctrine failed? Because that was the truth most still missed. There are rules until the battlefield breaks them. And then, you need pilots who think like warriors, not robots. I trained them to see, not just with sensors or optics, but with instinct sharpened by study. Every few months, I'd get a message. From Kandahar, or the Sulu Sea, or somewhere over ice-covered terrain in the Arctic. Ma'am, I flew the Rains loop. It worked. Or, we saved 17 guys today using Ember's shadow path. Thank you. They never had to thank me. They were the proof that it all mattered. One morning, I walked into Hangar 12 where they kept the decommissioned birds. And there she was, my Wyvern. Old, battered, scratched, and scorched from years of flight. They had cleaned her, painted the tail. Phantom Viper, 43 confirmed. They let me sit inside again. The cockpit felt the same, like it was waiting. I didn't fly her that day, just sat there, helmet in my lap, and thought about everything that had come from one moment of defiance. When I finally stepped down, a cadet stood at the hangar door. She couldn't have been older than 22, helmet under one arm, wide eyes fixed on me. Is it true, she asked, that you took on 60 armored vehicles alone? I smiled. No, I said. I had help. She blinked. My bird, my instincts, and 200 soldiers who needed me to be more than a name on a roster. The cadet nodded slowly. Then, one day, I want to fly like you. I stepped past her and said what I now told every pilot who dreamed beyond the limits others placed on them. Don't fly like me. Fly like you, unapologetically. Fly for something bigger than ego. And if they say you can't, remember, no one ever changed the sky by following the rules. That was the day I knew the mission would never end. Not as long as there were pilots who refused to be anything but excellent, no matter who doubted them. The Phantom Viper's legend wasn't mine alone anymore. It belonged to everyone who refused to stand down when it counted.